The monument is not in good shape. It was damaged by heat when the village's fine Victorian church burned down in 1954. And then 3 or 4 years ago, a Nova Scotia power crew accidentally broke the top off it. Should the monument be repaired, replaced, or removed? It's 75 years since the First World War, nearly 50 years since the Second. By 1994, Alma Dam had only one First World War veteran still living. Joseph Landry was 97, and his speech was no longer adequate for an interview. His son Ralph fought in World War II.
He was similar to a bunch of us when he left. I suppose he was young, and he was kind of shaky too, like all of us were. He went over, and he was in England most of it. He was with the medical department or medical corps of some kind. I don't know all the names of that people. Then they went to France for a while. And then the war finished, of course, and after that he was repatriated back to Canada. That's about the story of my father at that time.
Those names on the monument, who were those people anyway?
There was Leonard Pertus's brother there. He was a lieutenant in the First War. He had 2 or 3 years college here. That's why before he left here. I remember him walking the street before he left. And well, he lost his life in a plane. And that time, you know, if you were a pilot in a plane during the First War, it was quite an important thing. So I remember that.
What was that day called again? Something day.
V Day?
Yeah, Abbotsbury was at that.
V Day?
Everybody else at it.
How old were you when you joined the war? Or joined the
18.
Yeah. Did you ever shoot down any... No, did you ever shoot anybody down? Where were you at VE Day?
Better questions, any aircraft?
What?
Any aircraft.
Any aircraft?
You don't shoot people down, you shoot aircraft.
Okay.
My name is Joseph McLean, grade 12 student. I'm 18 years old. I'm a licensed private pilot, and I spent the summer acquiring my night rating. And I can relate a little bit to what Ralph Britton was saying about flying and how it's really beautiful when you're up in the air. It's really a different world, and I think especially for my age, I think it's quite exciting.
Well, they come in bombing. I got one that used to fly right by our airport, servicing Sherbrooke, I think it is, in the bay in western France. They just surrounded them and they didn't go in and take them. He flew something like 80 missions. When I saw the guys bail out, I was feeling sorry for them. Happy, still happy, but feeling sorry for them, you know. They lost an aircraft. They were going down in our territory. And you don't think of it, you think of shooting down an aircraft, not a human being. And it's a question of, you know, if I don't get him, he'll get me.
Did you lose any buddies during the war?
You're hardened up to adversity, I think. When you see so many people that you knew well, and in my case, the best friend I ever had was killed. After that, nothing seems quite as serious or as final as that was. You know, he full of life, and cheerful, and an hour later, the guy's dead. You know, he's not coming back. We'd been down to Paris shortly after the city was liberated, and they paced off the distance under the Arc, and they thought it would be a good idea to put an aircraft under there. So they went out one day, and 2 of them, and they flew through it. And of course, the Frenchmen didn't appreciate that, you know. They could have taken the tower down. there was a very large notice on the board the next day. Anyone caught flying over Paris was in deep trouble.
I'm Dylan LeBlanc. I'm 16 and I'm in grade 10. My hobbies include drawing and reading. And I'm going out with Melanie Laurie, that's Bradley's sister. When we started doing the show, I really picked up on the lighting. I'm not really sure why, it just interested me, and since then I guess I've been the main lighting guy for the show when we are shooting.
Yeah, that shot was taken on D-Day, very early in the morning of June 6, 1944, when the Algonquins started bombarding the coast. And that's the first shot that the Algonquins fired. In fact, it was the first time that a Canadian ship fired a shot on the continent of Europe in anger. That was it right there.
In 1939, when he was 16, Doug Forgeron joined the Merchant Marine as a galley boy. 3 years later, when he was old enough, he joined the Navy. On D-Day, he was a lieutenant on the destroyer Algonquin off the coast of France.
And that day, I'll never forget it, all day long, invasion barges and troop ships sailed out of the harbor in Cowes on the Isle of Wight. And there we were on the ship looking at them going, too stupid to figure out that the invasion was on that day. We arrived there. Our deadline to arrive was 20 minutes to 7. And we were to start bombarding the coast. And all you could see over the horizon was fire and flame, where the bombers had gone in first. And destroyers, battleships, cruisers, whatever kind of a ship with a gun was there. And everybody plowed into it. And at 6:45 exactly, after 5 minutes of bombardment, the army went in. That first day, they advanced 7 miles inland. As I remember in the afternoon, standing on the bridge with a pair of binoculars, and as far as we could see, there was the soldiers moving up. The Americans took an awful beating there that morning at their part of the beach, as the beach was divided into 3 or 4 sections. The Americans were to our right on Utah Beach. And when they got there, I guess the Germans were practicing invasion tactics. They were waiting for them. And the first wave of American soldiers to go ashore were just simply slaughtered. The water was red with blood. And the British were on our left, and we were right in the middle. We were the spearhead of the invasion fleet. And so was the Canadian Army. The Chaudière Regiment of Montreal and what was the Winnipeg Grenadiers. They were the 2 battalions that went in first. By the end of the day, almost 1 million men had gone ashore.
Some of the men on that beach were from Isle Madame.
Well, we landed around 6 o'clock in the morning. And the Germans was all cemented in, and they were just pushing the Canadian ashore, and the German was just flooding them like nothing.
I lost a friend that drug me ashore when I landed on D-Day. I jumped over the bow of the boat, the landing barge, and there was too much water for my height. I went under. This man we used to call Tiny, he drug me ashore. And he got killed the same night. We lost 10 people that night.
Father John J. MacDonald and Kenny Boudreau examined the monument. It's handsome and historic, but it's really beyond repair.
So, Kenny, what are we going to do with this?
They decide to talk to Jeff Boudreau, the manager of a small local company which has developed a method of manufacturing monuments that are both attractive and affordable. Forgeron was in the Italian campaign.
There was a fella from River Bourgeois got killed down there, potty fella. Me and him was in the same house. He hit, shell hit the, you know, the houses there. They got all corrugated roofs. It's made with this, what do they call that? Those tiles. It's tiles like if you split a tile in two and you put it one inside, the rain, you know, slipped. But all them roofs on the houses pretty well made with that them days. And the shell hit one corner of the house and come right through, and he was sitting in the fireplace right next to me. And a sharpman come down the fireplace and hit his hat, and his hat just was ribbons. Well, we took him out. His web gear was just holding him together. His web gear, his harness that he had, pouches for ammo and stuff. But what I found tough over them is the civilians, the little kids. That's what I found. That was my hardest thing. You would be advancing, or you'd move back, and you'd have to dig a swill hole or a latrine, you know, because you were 35 or 100 men there. So you had a lot of cans of M&V and bully beef and stuff to, you know, to throw in those swell holes. But what I used to find that we used to go in those swell holes and had to take out 3 and 4 kids bare naked before you put petrol in there to burn those holes, because they were eating the fat off of the bully beef cans and licking that and the M&V cans and stuff like that. That was my hardest thing to do, you know. And still and all, they'd scratch you to get down in there. They wanted to get back down in that hole to eat that fat in the cans. And how many big cans of bully beef, them big ones, that I cut with a cleaver and give it to those kids. I think that's the reason I'm saved, because we had too much of that stuff. There was too much, there was heart attacks. So I used to cut the cans and put them on the field. You couldn't give them a package of crackers like that in your hand. They'd tear you to pieces. They'd knock you over. You know, they were starving. So I'd turn around and rip those cans open and spread them on the field. And they'd have that.
Abel LeBlanc and Johnny Major were in Italy too. Abel was captured and rescued twice and wounded, all in one day.
So that morning we went to the attack in Herdelard. It was, that's the first time I met Johnny Major. I said to Johnny, I says, I wish I wasn't Peter Great right now. So we dug in our trenches, and the first thing, Johnny Major called me over. He says, LeBlanc, he says, would you mind coming over here? I says, what's wrong? Well, he says, there's 2 of the buddies that's dead here. Well, I says, okay. I said, being I was in charge of the platoon, I went over, and that's the time that I got wounded. So I finally, I felt a burning sensation going through the foot, but I never thought it was that serious. So I went back to my platoon, and back in the trench, and a buddy of mine, McMaster was his name, he took my boot off. He gave me, if I had first aid on me, so he applied first aid. The first thing I knew was hurch. The German had captured the whole company. A company was captured by the German. Everybody was their hands up.
We were digging in, and oh yes, another, before Abel got wounded. I was with Jim Muse from up the other side of Halifax too. We were number 1 and 2 on the Bren gun, you heard of that, I suppose, Bren guns. We were digging a trench. We had just got our objective, gained our objective. We were digging this trench to protect ourselves a bit, and there were snipers in the trees ahead of us. And Jimmy was fed up with it. He didn't feel like living anymore, I don't think. I was digging, and he was on top, laying down. And I said, Jim, keep your head down. He says, I don't care anymore. He never, it wasn't, the words were out of his mouth till he got shot through the head. So he fell on top of me. like to one side. I tried to put a field dressing on his head, but that was foolish, as I was just trying to comfort him more than anything. It went through his head and almost came out the other side. I could see the pimple on the other side of his head. Anyway, he died there, and that's when the rest of the gang was captured. They were mowing. There was such heavy fire there, you could see them mowing the grass over the top of you.
So B Company was on the right flank, and when they saw us coming up with our hands up, not me because I had stayed in the trenches, but the rest of the boys, B Company recaptured us. So finally I waited, and around approximately 09:30 at night, things was calming down. I says to man, master, I says, I want you to carry me out the line. So they said, all right. So they made a bosun chair, and they carried me out. So I says to man, I says, I believe you're going the wrong way there. He says, we're in charge of you now, not you. So they carried me a little while, and then they made their rest and keep on carrying. I said, you're going the wrong way. Well, first thing, out of church. We're captured again with the Germans. But they were behind our lines. They were having a recce behind our lines. It wasn't formation. They could get through them. You know. So I says to man, I says, and McMaster, I says, you know what? I says, get on the left-hand flank. I said, they're going up our way. And I says, if our platoon is still there, they're going to get them. So, by God, we walked, and by rat-a-tat-tat-tat, my own platoon was still there. So there was a embankment on the left-hand side, so I jumped over. I didn't mind, my foot didn't hurt in those days, and not that at the present time. So after things settled down, I could hear them talk. They were just from here, or maybe from here across the road here from me. I says, is that the West Novies? Because I didn't know the password. I had left that night, and they had changed the password, so I didn't know the password. And by taking the chance for me to crawl on the other side, I would have been shot, so I didn't want to take no chances. So who answered me was my Lieutenant, Charlie Irving, from Truro. He says, what in the heck are you doing there? I said, I was taken prisoner. Well, he says, crawl on this side, for God's sake. And then in August, I came back to Canada in 44. So all that time, they didn't find a bullet in my foot there. My bullet was still lodged in the leg. So I was taking a bath home, and I says, by God, I says, I believe that's the bullet. When I went into Truro, a medical doctor came in, make his round in the morning. I says, I found the bullet. He says, what bullet? I said, the bullet that I had it through the foot. He says, where's it at? I says, right here. By God, he says, that's him, all right. He said, after I'm finished with my round, he says, well, we're going to take you to the OR. Took me to the OR, and they just lanced it. There was no needle or nothing. They just lanced it. And he took the bullet out. I says, thank you for the souvenir, boy.
I'm Mark J.R. Cameron. I do claymation, which is basically taking clay, modeling clay, and you make it into one shape, take a frame, move into another shape, take a frame of that, so you see an animation of that. That's pretty cool. My grandmother was a nurse during the Second World War, and she worked in London, and she met my grandfather, who was considered a Canadian.
I met him the first day I was on duty in K Block. Didn't know a soul there. And everybody around me was passing by the office. I was in charge of the ward. And everybody was looking for the canary. Canary. Where's the canary? I said, what are you talking about? The Canadian. So I eventually made acquaintance with the Canadian. And that was Arthur Theriault. We were together a few times because in the next ward we had people from, the soldiers from Dunkirk. It was just after Dunkirk this happened. and they were French, and therefore they need a lot of translating. So Arthur and I were doing the translating for other people. And that's exactly how we met. It never occurred to me that anybody would want to marry me. And it was a bit of a shock when he eventually did. I'd only known him for 3 weeks, but he said, you know, if after the war we could perhaps get married, you know. And I was so taken aback that I couldn't give him an answer. He didn't get an answer till about 3 months later. And that was that. We got engaged, and that was in the 1940, December 1940. And we were married in 1942. Just after Arthur and I got engaged, I'd gone, he was doing CB because he had overstayed his leave for 24 hours. So I went over to see him. This was over in Croydon way from where I was in southeast London, in Eltham. Got there all right, and on the way back, the air raid warnings had gone before I left Croydon. The air raid was going good and strong at that time, and we were all, quite a few of us, waiting there, hopefully that a bus would come along, and it didn't. And then all of a sudden we had a big explosion, and we all sort of hit the deck, and I had a couple of soldiers on top of me, and when everything sort of cleared, we got up and said, well, the only thing to do is to walk home. The flak was just coming, and it was bzzz, bzzz. It made a funny little noise, you know, when it came down. And I arrived home, and my mum and dad had been in the shelter all the evening, and I got there, and they were just going up to the house. They were chancing it to make that precious cup of tea. But I dived into the shelter, and it was like getting home. It's a really funny feeling. You just have to get home. And it doesn't matter if something kills you when you get there, but you've got to get home. We got married in the 11th of April, 1942. And my husband died the 22nd of January, 1990. So that was 46 years.